Abhijit Singh from Algoworks, and we are going to start with the introduction to the Agile process and the Scrum methodologies. So, get started with the first topic that we are going to cover today. That would be introduction to Agile. Okay, so when we talk about Agile, so Agile is a form of a project development process in which there is a continuous iteration of the development and testing throughout the software development life cycle, which is quite different from the waterfall model in which you gather the requirement and after that you implement that requirement, and once the project is completed you give it to the customer for the feedback, or you implement that into the customer environment. But with Agile, since there is a continuous process of development and testing, and the overall project is broken down into small chunks that we call sprint, which we will be covering later in this process as a part of this video. So those sprints give the flexibility to the software development teams and the stakeholders to make any adjustment and the modifications to the overall process. Okay, so to move forward, so the overall process of the agile methodology will be, once the requirement is defined, after that the UI development is done. As you can see, it's a iterative loop, and this process is repeated for every sprint. Okay, so the UI design is done, and after that development comes in picture, then the QA is performed, then UI happens, and after that the release, either that would be a yes or a no, and or there will be any changes that would be covered in CR. So a release of the sprint happens, and that involves the deployment of the product into the customer environment, or in an environment that would be acting as a beta version, from where that would be further release integrated into the existing modules, or the module that has to be developed and released into the production. So moving forward, when you talk about Scrum, so Scrum is, you can say, the most essential component when we talk about Agile process. So what the Scrum model suggests, that project can be broken down into small modules or small features, which we can name as sprints. So the ideal size of the sprint is of 2 weeks, and the maximum that could stretch it up to 4 weeks. Okay, so the chunk in which all the components are defined, that which are the features that will be developed. So once they are developed, that will be tested and handed over to the stakeholders for the UI process. And if that specific piece of development works as per the expected behavior, that can be pushed down further into the approval process. Okay, so when we talk about Scrum, so as Scrum advocates for planning of the meeting at the start of the sprint, and when the team figure out that how many items they can commit, they can create a sprint backlog and the list of tasks to perform during that specific sprint. Okay, and after that, during an agile process, the Scrum team takes a small set of features, okay, from idea, code set, and test the functionality. So all these specifics are being mentioned here, and to discuss the overall progress on a daily level, a 15-minute meeting is recommended on a daily basis, and that is normally headed by either a product owner or a Scrum master. Okay, so getting back to the process, the overall process of the Scrum software development cycle will be, the managers and the executives and the customers, all these will give input to the product owner. The product owner will create a, you can say, product backlog. Okay, and after that the sprint planning meeting will happen, in which all the team members will connect and their ideas will be captured in the form of meeting notes, and they will be further modified and broken down into tasks. Okay, and those components will be called as sprint backlog. and there will be an iteration of 1 to 4 weeks. That is the ideal recommended size of the sprint, and that totally depends on the chunk that has been identified for the development. Okay, and the sprint master or the scrum master will create that sprint, and the daily stand-up meetings will happen, sprint reviews will happen, and after that the work is finished, the sprint will be handed over to the stakeholders to review, and once that process is also complete, it can be further pushed into the production. Okay, so covering the last topic of the day, what are the advantage of the Scrum model over the other existing, or you can say legacy product development models? So Scrum ensures the effective use of time and money, because since it's like breaking down all the requirements into small chunks, so it gives the flexibility of, and you can say the required clarity into the product, and early access and early visibility to handle and to access or manage any changes that are required, so preventing any large amount of recurring cost that can come into picture if the whole product becomes faulty. And since the large products are divided into small modules, in that way parallel development and manageability also gets easier as compared to developing the overall project from start to the end in a single go. And the development, since it can be handled in parallel, manageability is better, so all these things can move in parallel and are normally developed as per the desired schedule or the desired time frame. And because of the daily scrum meetings, the team get good clarity of what they need to do and how they need to move forward with the overall development. And Scrum is all about being agile, adaptive of the feedbacks from the customers and the stakeholders, and incorporating them in a very dynamic fashion. So all these things make Scrum most superior model for the project development as compared to the other existing models that we have in the market or in the overall IT product development cycle, like the waterfall model or any other model which we can think of. So that will be all for today, and thanks a lot everyone for your time, and have a good day.